every time we get a good little speech, me and my little Democratic friends, they always like, "Yes, this is our president,"
You're like,
or
this is him. This is the man.
this is just this is a really great speech, and he could be
Yes.
a great senator. Like, don't
And
put
y'all
too
can't
much on
take
him.
everybody up out the Senate and the House and the governor's mansions and put them in the White House.
Don't steal our
Can't do
joy,
that for
Eugene. Stop
everybody.
trying to steal
Yeah.
our joy. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the 4th of July episode of Clock It.
250 years of this country. How's it
Semi-quincentennial.
doing? How's it doing? Yeah, this is the last episode that you guys have to hear Simone say semi-quincentennial. After
Hater.
that, you can't say no more. This week, we have invited an expert on the Constitution to the group chat, legal scholar Melissa Murray. She will be here with us just a little bit later.
They'd been fighting the Revolutionary War and had literally picked a fight with the biggest global superpower the world had ever seen. And they were doing it with a government that they'd cobbled together out of gum and friendship
Mm.
bracelets. So they had to craft a government that was strong enough to work, but not so strong that it would become tyrannical.
I love Melissa Murray. I literally love
Amazing.
her. She's a shout out to the big cousin. Okay, but
Icon.
to kick off the show, Eugene and I first wanted to talk about how Americans are feeling on the country's 250th birthday. Not about what Trump is doing, okay? We don't want to just talk about how MAGA is celebrating, right? We want to talk about how everyday Americans are reflecting on our history this week and frankly what they're trying to make happen in the future because there's stuff going on in America.
That's right. And we're seeing people do this publicly in a few different ways. There's what Americans are telling reporters, there's what they're telling pollsters, and there's how crowds are reacting to politicians. And Simone, before we get there, how are you feeling as a Black woman, as a Black millennial woman, on television, 250 years into this country?
Look, I'm gonna say two things, and I don't want people to be like, "Oh, she's sugarcoating it for work." No,
Right.
child. There's no script in
Yeah,
here
she
for this
doesn't do
part,
yeah.
and I don't sugarcoat for work. I feel two ways. One, I do not think there is a better time to have been born in this country, to be alive, to be young,
Correct.
Black, and gifted. As you know, I often talk to the elders and the mentors. And I'll just say, I don't think he'll mind me saying this. I said to former Attorney General Eric Holder some weeks ago, something bad had happened, and I think we were messaging, and I was just like, "Sir, it's bleak." And you know what Eric Holder told me? He said, it was bleaker for the people that came before us. If you
Hmm.
think this is bleak, it was bleak for John Lewis on the bridge. It was bleak for the folks coming out of Reconstruction. It was bleak during the Civil War. Like it's been bleaker for so many who came before us, and they did so much with less. And so we do not have the luxury to say, "Oh, this is too much," and throw up our hands. We can acknowledge the difficulties, but we have to plow down and get back to work. And so I feel grateful to be here. I am concerned that enough people in this country do not know our history. But I am hopeful for the future because hope is the only way through. How do you feel,
Yeah.
Eugene?
Similarly, I think, I'm a military brat. And so I was always the kid that put their hand on their heart and shut the hell up during the Pledge of Allegiance or, during the singing of the national anthem. And the older I get and the more you learn about this country, the more your eyes are open to the ills of this country. What I think America shows better than maybe any place else in the world is the immense horror
Mm.
that humans can inflict upon each other, but also the great good that is possible. And I think like America is that both of those things all the time, right? It is at every single turn. Can show you how possible life can be and also how good some people are at snuffing out that life or trying to keep that hope down. What I have learned most over the last some odd years is to always keep your eyes open, always be moving forward and to stay focused on kind of what I'm supposed to be doing, what we as a collective say that we want to do. I think they're not always the loudest voices, but I think there are more people in this country than not who want to try to move forward together, and we have to figure it out. Like I think the thing is like
It's the
we
only
like literally
option.
have no fucking choice. Like
It's the only
we have
option.
we have no other choice but to like figure it out. Like y'all snatched us up out of Africa, snatched brought us over here. So now we have to figure out how to move forward and live together,
Not only
right?
did they
We,
bring us here, we built this country. As you
yeah.
know,
Hmm.
I believe it's Angela Rye that used to sell
Yes.
these T-shirts that said,
Yeah.
"We built this joint for free."
Yes. Yes.
And we, as in the ancestors, our ancestors who came over here from chattel
Yeah.
slavery. And the
Right.
beauty of America is that over the course of our history, the we has expanded to now include all of us. We are, in fact, our ancestors' wildest dreams. And so throughout this country, right? We're going to talk about it, but I know it seems terrible right now, folks, but this is our country. The
Yeah.
story that America has been able to write is a phenomenal, remarkable story that is
Yeah.
only possible because the people have willed it and worked for it to be so. So y'all not about to have me being doom and gloom about America, child. I'm not going nowhere else. I'm
Right.
American.
This is
America.
it.
This is Americana.
Yes, exactly.
We are here.
Exactly. 250 years is not that long. We are still a very young nation. And sometimes we get too big for our britches. And
Mm.
sometimes when you when there's a young kid, you got to talk to them. You got to start acting up, and they might go wrong way for a little bit. You just snatch them up one good time. You know what I mean? You say, come back over here, get back in the lane that we have chosen for you. I think that is like what the people of this country can do. If we will it, it
Hmm.
will be. This country only works if we decide it does. Democracy only works if everyone decides it works,
It
whether
is
that's
not
the
a spectator
institutions.
sport.
No, you got to get active.
Hmm.
Everybody who has come before us knew that in a real way. And everybody who came before us had to get that lesson of what they needed to do. And so this is us getting our lesson
You know
in
what?
what we need to be doing.
John Ossoff kind of
Yeah.
spoke to this at a rally that he had recently.
This broken moment is an opening, not for restoration, but for reformation.
You ain't got to go back to the same thing. That is something. You know who said that to me? Not recently. Times of Flat Circle. Your old boss, Vice President Harris, said that to me. Is that like it does not have like we don't have to go back to the same country we were. We can fix it and do more. That crowd at John Ossoff's speech, that was a campaign rally in Savannah, Georgia, last Saturday. And one of the things he did in the speech that I thought was really interesting is that, and that the crowd really thought was interesting, was he didn't stoke their anger.
Hmm.
He kind of expressed this confidence that Americans have, I think, in the
Hmm.
same way we believe, the wherewithal to fight for what they want their country to be. Let's listen to him again.
Just think 250 years on, what the founders would see if they visited us today. But wait, they would see that slavery had been abolished. They would see that Americans without land and then women's and then the descendants of slaves had secured voting rights. They would see that our science and discovery propelled human knowledge to unimaginable heights, and that those 13 colonies had grown into a superpower that defeated the Nazis and communism. They'd see a
These
pluralist
speeches are why
democracy,
people are like,
people of
John
all
Ossoff
colors
needs to be
descended
running
from
Run
for
for
president.
2020.
And I'm like, y'all got to stop. Let the man get reelected as senator. Um,
Let him
Amer-
focus on one job first.
Come on now.
Yes.
America is just so enamored. Look, Democrats, we just so desperate, child. Every time,
Y'all
Eugene,
are. Every time.
every time we get a good little speech, me and my little Democratic friends, they always like, yes, this is our president.
You're like,
Or
this is him. This is the man.
or this is just this is a really great speech, and he could be a
Yes.
great senator. Like, don't
And
put
y'all
too much
can't
on
take
him.
everybody up out the Senate and the House and the governor's mansions and put them in the White House.
Don't steal our
Can't do
joy,
that for
Eugene. Stop
everybody.
trying to steal our joy. But I think that he really, to your point, I think it really laid out what we're talking about, that there are
Yeah.
terrible things that have happened. Obviously, this country is not perfect. It is far from perfect.
Quite
But,
raggedy sometimes.
well, to say the least. What did Eddie Glaude say on Stephanie Rule's show?
I don't believe in the idolatry of the state. I'm not interested in loving abstractions or things that are so morally dubious that, you know, what we've been talking about. The power of the country is in the people. It's in we the people. It's in everyday folk. That's where my love is, close to the ground.
He's talking about his book. So he wrote this new book. It is the third, I think, in a trilogy about the country. And he said it on our show as well on the weekend. He said, I don't love America. Now, I'm like, well, sir, you know, them people gonna be having, they gonna have a lot of questions about that. You can't black people out here saying stuff like that. And so he explained it in the same way he explained to Stephanie there. Because what is the country, he said to us, I think on our show, if not the actual people? It's not an idea, right? It's like the humans that put the idea there. So it is, he's a professor at Princeton. So like it is a very
He took us to
intellectual,
class.
yes, it's a very intellectual and thoughtful exercise about what do you mean, what do we mean when we say I love America? Are we talking about the landmass? Are we talking about the papers that the man wrote, 250 plus years ago? Are we talking about the people that are walking around in this country currently?
MS Now, you know, we've been, well, not us, Eugene, but our colleagues, when they're out
Yeah.
talking to people, getting what we call, for the folks listening, man on the street sound, that's at MOS.
MOS.
They've been asking people, like, what comes to mind when people think about America's 250th birthday? And I think we should talk about some of their responses. So,
Yeah.
our colleague, Maya Eaglin, who's a reporter,
Mhm.
she has collected a lot of these thoughts over the past couple of weeks. On Juneteenth weekend, she spoke to people who were walking around the reflecting pool in Washington, D.C. I do believe it was still green then. Um, come on.
Look, it's still kind of green now, frankly.
Still kind of green. One person that she spoke to, actually, they brought up the founders, just like John Ossoff did in his speech. But Beth, she told Maya she thinks those men would look at us now and actually be disappointed.
Interesting.
Why do you think they would be disappointed?
Because they warned us. They told us to watch out for this, and we didn't do it.
I see you're very passionate about this. Where's this emotion coming from?
You know, I went to school to have a career in public service, and that is what I've dedicated my career to. And to see us so lost and dysfunctional just breaks my heart.
Damn, Beth.
I mean, now let me just say this, because I wrote some notes after I heard
Yeah.
Beth say this. I know, right? It's not as hopeful as what John Ossoff said, but Beth was right.
But I think it is, yeah. Yeah.
Look, the founders repeatedly warned that the American system would eventually face a test, and it would face a test where ambitious leaders, where partisan loyalty, and where what they
Mhm.
referred to as, like, I guess it could be public apathy,
Yeah, yeah.
collided. And much of what the founders wrote is not necessarily prophecy, then it is a diagnosis that if the republic failed, it would likely fail because the safeguards stopped working. And so, I mean, they wrote about this in many different ways in the Federalist
Yeah.
Papers. You know, James Madison, he famously wrote, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary." So the founders
Exactly.
did think about this.
I feel like sometimes when we see people cry about the country, we think, oh, they're so sad. But I feel like at the same, yes, Beth seems very sad. But at the same time, having an emotion about a situation still means there's hope to fix it. Like when I fight with my husband or my friends or whoever and we're still arguing, that means that we're trying to fix it, right? Sometimes you're crying because you don't know what to do, but that doesn't mean you're
Mm.
done, right? Like it means that like there's still more there. When I'm despondent and there's no emotional reaction, it's a wrap. You know what I mean? Like I'm done with the situation. I'm done with this fight. I might be done with you. You know what I mean? Like add some X's. But like it does feel like there's still fight left in people, that people can do things. And you know, the day before Maya met Beth, she interviewed a woman named Jocelyn Marie Good. This was at a Juneteenth event in Brooklyn.
Well, I think about what are we going to do next? It's really easy to it's really easy to look into the past and be critical of what has happened, but the past is fixed. And I think one thing that being in America has showed is how much can change, how much is possible. And when we look at, like, even in our own lifetimes, I was born in the 80s, and technology has really changed the reality of the world. So as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of this very baby country compared to the rest of the world, it's really an opportunity to realize that the hope is in the future, and what is it that we really want to use our freedom to make happen next.
No notes, Jocelyn.
At
No
all.
notes. Like, I'm just gonna take what Jocelyn said and I need it on a t-shirt. Because she's
Correct.
right. She's absolutely correct. See, this is why we need to. I think sometimes on television, and we've heard this from the people that watch our shows and the folks who are in the comments on social media. Sometimes people say we focus too much on, like, Donald Trump and what Trump is saying and what Republicans are doing and what the politicians are saying, and not enough on what the people are saying. So we need a good balance. It's an important check, I feel like, because
Yeah.
sometimes I think the politicians and the elected officials are saying one thing, Eugene, and nobody checks with the people and asks them what they
Right.
think. And from Beth to Jocelyn, right, we've got some thoughts. Maya also spoke to some folks in Times Square on June 14th, and Janie Trunsalido, she had something to say.
You have so much respect from other countries just being an American. So I take a lot of pride in that. And I think as we approach, 250 years is just being aware and, with great responsibility comes great, with great
power
comes great responsibility, yes. So I think that's the United States. I think that we just need to be more careful and we have to be, a little bit better in this current time to embrace our diversity and celebrate diversity. That's the whole point,
Yeah,
Shout
that
out to
Spider-Man
Maya.
quote's difficult sometimes. Yes, Maya helping her out there.
Well, it feels like people are hopeful, Eugene.
Yeah.
And none of the people I think that Maya spoke to said that America is over.
Right. Because it can't be. Like, it just can't be. And I think this is like it is the sheer stubbornness of why this country is here still beats in our hearts. It's still in the blood, right? Like, it still was passed down through all of us, right? Whether
Mhm.
you're black and you remember and your family were slaves, right? The fight it takes to get out of that, the fight it takes to live through that, not just get out of it, to live through it and make sure that your family extends, right? That is
Mhm.
an insane amount of fight in
Mhm.
you.
The indigenous people in this land that were here
yes,
well before anybody else.
okay.
The Japanese who were interned that stayed here
Hello.
and made this country their own despite what the country did to them.
The white people that stood up and said slavery is some bullshit,
Come
and we're
on.
gonna fight the Civil War over it.
Come on,
and you're not gonna own
abolitionists.
human beings. Like, they have the people who come from them are also still here, and so I think, like, that stubbornness, the men who were very, very, very flawed, owned humans, and created this country, and decided they no longer wanted a tyrannical leader from on high telling them what to do. No taxation without representation. All you have to do is, like, tap into it.
Mm.
Like, you just have to tap into it. And it's difficult. It is very hard. There's a lot going on. I understand. And frankly, you and I are very privileged, right? Like, let's be
Yes.
real. And so when we talk to people who have less than us, and they're like, I ain't worried about it. I can't focus on all that. I get it. I understand it is too much.
Gallup actually conducted a poll, and I believe
Yeah.
it was in May, and they
Yeah.
asked people how they plan to mark the semi-quincentennial. And you know
Yeah.
what? 88% of them could name at least one reason that they feel optimistic about the future. And the most popular reason, do you know what it was?
No, what was it?
The most popular reason was because, quote unquote, people willing to stand up for what they believe is right.
Yeah. I always thought the people who created this country, who wanted to make sure the country made good on its promises, that they had something we didn't have. I think we were taught that, right? They are heroes. They are 100% heroes.
Are
But
they?
but yes, like, but heroes in the sense that, like, they stood up. Like, they stood up and they said, like, I am not gonna take this shit anymore. Or this is the promise you made to the country. This is the promise you made to the people of the country. Make good on those promises. And I always thought they were they were able to tap into something we couldn't tap into. And as I get older, and we talk about this with Melissa, I realized that, like, oh wait, we also have those things in us. And like they were
Mhm.
everyday people at one point in their lives, right? Like none of them had superpowers. They had more hope than many of us, but you can choose to do that, right? They had more fight and more grit, but you can choose to have more fight and more grit. Like it is standing 10 toes down on what you believe and moving forward and finding community that will do that with you. You can't do it alone. And so I think the folks saying, the people willing to stand up for what they believe is right is such a reminder that it always comes back to this. We the people, it's all of us.
We, the preamble to the Constitution, we the people, in order to
Mhm.
form a more perfect union. Who is the we? Well, we talk about all of this with Melissa Murray. I feel like people just need to hear the episode, Eugene.
Yeah, let's take a break right here. And when we come back, we'll have scholar, writer, lawyer, big cousin Melissa Murray with us in the group chat.
Let's get into it. Hashtag America. Hashtag we
Stupid.
are the world. Hashtag we are
Stop.
Americans
That's enough.
too.
We are Americans too. Correct.
Hashtag they trying to take us back. We not going back. Okay, welcome back and welcome the incomparable, our big cousin, Melissa Murray. This is the
Yes.
4th of July, okay? Well, this is the 4th of July episode, folks, which is, among many other things, a celebration of a handful of legal documents written more than 200 years ago. And we wanted to have a legal expert in the group chat, okay? And who better than the scholar and writer whose newest book is titled The U.S. Constitution, a comprehensive and annotated guide for the modern reader. The book is really about telling the American people, Eugene, that this country belongs to them, to us. I would also note that Melissa is a cultural scholar that the streets
Correct.
don't know. So that's also why she makes sense here.
It makes a lot of sense. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. The three of us all have platforms: TV, online books, podcasts. Of course, Melissa, you co-host the Strict Scrutiny podcast, which has been
I
going
do.
strong for a long time. And I think it's important that we have a conversation
Mm-hmm.
about the conflicted feelings that Black people, brown people, women, queer people might have around the 4th of July. And a 4th of July that has become kind of colored in Trumpism, right? Because it's not just that it's the 4th of July, right? There's a world in which you have a president who, when talking about the 4th of July, talking about the celebrations in the people city, DC, it would be about celebrating everyone. And that is not what we have. And I guess I'm curious how you're feeling as someone who I feel like you can only study the Constitution if you love the Constitution. If you love the Constitution, you probably have love for the country. And I'm curious, as someone who has all that,
That's deep. That
I
was
don't know if that's
deep.
true.
It
It
was
may not be
Is
deep.
that
true.
true?
It may not be true, but I feel like you to be someone in the legal profession, you
Mhm.
have to believe that the founding documents require checking up on, but also like
Mm.
they hold a special place in your mind and in your heart.
I think that's right. So I've often talked about this, but I am the daughter of immigrants. My parents are
Mhm.
from Jamaica and they came here in the 1950s. My father came here to go to college at Howard. My mother came here in the 1960s on a nursing visa to fill a
Mm.
shortage of nurses in New
Hmm.
York. And, I don't think there is a more fervent proselytizer than the converted. And
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
immigrants love this country. I mean, my parents, they loved Jamaica, but I think they also appreciated deeply the opportunities that were available to them and to me because they came here. And, I've talked about my grandmother. I was
Mm-hmm.
6 when I realized I was a better reader than my grandmother. She was born at a time
Mm.
when you didn't
Mm.
educate women for doing
Mm.
anything beyond running a household and, managing basic books. So she never really became a scholar, but she was determined that her daughters would finish high school. And she had 7 children, 5 girls. My mother
Wow.
was the eldest. And she sold eggs. She sold lunches to the police precinct down the street to make sure that her daughters had the education that she didn't. And one of those daughters, my mother, came to the United States and was determined that I would have the education that even she had not had. So, I mean, in a very real way, this country made it
Mm.
possible for me to be my grandmother's
Mhm.
wildest dreams. I don't think she or my mother could have predicted I would go to law school, that I would
Right.
work for someone who would sit on the Supreme Court, that I would be a professor myself, that people would see me on TV, that I would go to the
Mm.
White House and know the Vice President of the United States, not this one, but the last one. Like
To be
that,
clear.
Yes, the
we
the
have to be
last one
clear about
likes
that.
you. The last one does like you very
I like
much.
her.
Yes, yes, yes. Her Jamaican sister.
She Jamaican and South Asian sister. That's
Yes,
my
Come on.
girl.
correct.
Come on.
So I mean, like, there's no other country in which my life is possible, and I
Right.
know that. I'm grateful for that. I was recently
Mm.
on a PBS special with Dan Crenshaw from Texas, the Republican congressman for Texas, and he was just sort of like, people need to be grateful to be from the
Hmm.
United States, to be American. I was like, we are grateful. We are. I mean, like,
Right.
what do you require of gratitude?
What do
Like,
you want us
Mm.
to do?
supplicate, be
Exactly.
subjugated. But that's not
Hmm.
gratitude. I mean, I am incredibly grateful. And I feel like the way I pay it forward and show that gratitude is to remain faithful to what this country is supposed to be. And here's the thing. This country is not a monarchy. It
Mhm.
is a democracy premised on principles of limited government. And there was a time when Republicans used to bang that drum harder than anybody.
Hmm.
Limited government, this idea that the government cannot go too far, it cannot be excessive in the way that it works. And there's a whole constitution that's about structuring limits on the government and providing the people with rights that the government cannot impinge upon. And that's what it means to
Yeah.
have a democracy of limited
Mhm.
government. And that's what I believe. That's why I'm a law professor today, and it's why I wrote this book, because we live in a time where I think many of us have lost sight of what this document does, what it was trying to do, and how every day we have to recommit to making sure that we are living up to its credos every single day.
Yeah.
Are you hopeful on this semi-quincentennial?
I
Yes,
hate
I learned
whoever
how to
told
say.
this woman how to say this
I
word.
taught myself. I taught
She been
myself.
saying this word at
Okay.
every
It's a
moment.
hard word. It
It
is a
On
hard
July
is.
word to
5th,
say.
I don't know what she gonna do after July 5th, honey, because she say that word every episode
I love.
of
I
this show
love.
and the weeknight.
I love it. I'm glad that I learned it. Shout out to open the schools. The rest of these motherfuckers need to
Okay.
learn the words. Okay. Semi-quincentennial. So, how would you grade America?
Well, I'm a Jamaican mom. So when my kids
Mhm.
come home with a 95, I'm like, where are the other 5 points?
Right.
Where are they at? Like,
Right.
what are we doing here? Um,
Right.
America right now, we've got work to do. And I think we know
Mhm.
that. But here's the thing. We've always been like that. We've never gotten to the point where, like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is it. 10 out of 10, no notes. Like, we've always been
Mhm.
working toward something better. Right after the Constitution was ratified, there were those who
Mhm.
were like, you haven't gone far enough. We need rights for the people. And so
Right.
the Bill of Rights amendments were ratified in 1791, almost right after the Constitution. So even then, we recognized, okay, we didn't quite get it right. There's more we can do. After the Civil War, we have the Reconstruction Amendments, where we're
Mhm.
literally renegotiating the balance of power between the federal government and the states, and the federal government, the states, and the people, remaking the Constitution in real time. Then in the Gilded Age, we have this consolidation of wealth and
Right.
this incredible rise of oligarchy, and the working classes are just like, what is happening? We don't want this. And they are so upset about what is going on in the country. They want a progressive income tax that makes the rich pay their fair share. They're
Mm.
tired of the federal government raising revenues by levying, wait for it, tariffs, which they understand are really just regressive taxes that are borne
Wherever heard
disproportionately
that for?
by the poor.
I
I
mean,
mean, there are no new ideas. There are no
No,
new
literally
ideas.
everything is old.
I mean, old wine, new bottles. But they
Exactly.
decide that they're going to get the Constitution changed in order to have a progressive income tax, and they succeed. They get the 16th Amendment passed, and then they look
mm.
to the 17th Amendment, which is about the direct election of senators, because in the original Constitution, the founders were worried about the mass populace getting to elect senators, and so they made senators elected by the state legislature. that becomes a vehicle for massive corruption where state legislatures send these corporate lackeys to the Senate. And so the people are like, we should be
Mm.
able to do that. We should be able to elect our senators ourselves. We should be able to elect our own corporate lackeys. And they
Right,
do.
right.
And they get the 17th Amendment. So we constantly are working toward something better. That's the point of the Constitution. And I think there's still more work for us to do, and we can still do it.
I for those of you that's gonna be like, he don't love America. I am an army brat. My father has
Hmm.
gone to every
Hmm.
war we've had since 1989, before when I was born,
Mm.
every time in the Middle East, all the peacekeeping missions. So you can't say shit to me about being patriotic. My mother was a single mother for many, many years because my father was over there fighting for your right to talk that shit to me. So let's be very, and I'll put that on the table. So that's one. I love this country. But also, Melissa, I am, and I think a lot of people are, like, conflicted about how the country has treated people that
Mm.
look like me, that love like me, that look like my mother and my aunties, that look like you guys. And what comes up for me is the James Baldwin quote, right? That I love America more than any other country in the world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right, like I love this country, and therefore I'm going to require more from I don't know why we call it her, from him, because right now it's raggedy, so it's giving man. So I'm going to always ask for more. I'm going to always push for, in the work that I do as a journalist, push for the lawmakers to make good on the promises that were made by the people that came before them. I don't know if you're feeling conflicted, but as we're at 250 years, which, there's a theory out there that 250 years, that's when you start seeing crumbling empires, but I think that's another episode. But we're hitting 250. I feel conflicted. I think a lot of people do. What do you say to
Hmm.
people who feel conflicted about, like, the patriotism that certain people require of Black and brown folks in this country?
Mm.
So I'm okay living in a world of duality. I mean, I went to the
Yeah.
University of Virginia, right? That
Hmm.
is a school with a very complicated history. And
Hmm.
I loved my
Hmm.
time at the University of Virginia. Not all of it, but I love it. I am grateful to the University of Virginia for giving me a great education, for making it free. I had a full scholarship to the University of Virginia. So I'm deeply grateful. But I think every institution has its problems. And I think it takes a real one to be able to see both the vice and the virtues and still love it,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
I don't think patriotism is pandering. I don't think patriotism is about papering over the flaws that you see in your country. Patriotism
Hmm.
is about loving the country anyway and working
Hmm.
to make that better. I mean, and I'm not the only one who thinks that.
Right.
Thomas Jefferson, a flawed person in his way, but also a genius in his way, talked incessantly about how we constantly had to hold leaders to account. We always had to be thinking, like, is this the right balance? Always ready to kind of recalibrate. I mean, that was the whole point of
Mm.
a government of, for, and by the people. And we live right now at a time where dissent to some feels like a lack of patriotism. I just don't think that's true. I mean, the whole
No, it's to be
It's
clear,
n-
don't hedge, Melissa. It's not true.
so I
right.
mean, the idea of dissent is baked into the Constitution itself. And
Hmm.
so when these guys went to,
That's
well,
how
it's
the
all
country was
guys,
born. Yeah.
they went to Philadelphia in 1787, this hot ass summer, and they were literally going through it. Like, this was a time of trauma for them. So they had the trauma of living through the colonial period where the
Hmm.
British Parliament was taxing them relentlessly. The British Crown sent a standing army into their streets to police them. They were working through that. They were also
Hmm.
working through the period immediately preceding 1787, where they'd been fighting the Revolutionary War and had literally picked a fight with the biggest global superpower the world had ever seen. And they were doing it with a government that they'd cobbled together out of gum and friendship
Mm.
bracelets. So they had to craft a government that was strong enough to work, but not so strong that it would become tyrannical. So, I mean, the
Mm.
crux of the Constitution is, how do we promote democracy, but also limit the prospect of government tyranny? And so they do this in a number of ways, like structurally by dividing power between the federal government and the states, and then dividing federal power between these three branches so that no single branch can consolidate power and become
Allegedly.
tyrannical.
Hmm.
Hmm.
But then they give the people these
Hmm.
rights that the government can't encroach upon. But then they hit upon this other point. What's the point of these limits on the federal government? What's the point of giving the people rights if the people aren't prepared to enforce the limits and defend their rights jealously? So they recognize in this moment that what democracy requires is not simply a new model of government, it requires a new model for the governed. The people have to know this Constitution, they have to know it inside and out, and they have to be prepared to call out the government when it goes too far. And if you look at the First Amendment, yes, the First Amendment is about religious pluralism and freedom of speech. But at bottom, it's a hedge against tyranny. They were not churchy men by any stretch of the imagination. Thomas Jefferson was not a churchy dude, but he was very much in favor of the First Amendment. And he wrote about it to James Madison. Like, we definitely need religious freedom. And why do we need it? Because he believed that if people had religious faith, they had alternative sources of values and allegiances beyond the state itself. And if they believed something, whether it was Judaism or Islam or Christianity, and they had a whole set of beliefs through that, when the state came peddling its orthodoxy, maybe people would be like, I don't know if I believe that. Like, this idea that religion and the state could be in tension, like, that was a productive tension for them, because it meant that the people could be like, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I don't like that. I don't want that. And they would be prepared to be skeptical. They wanted a skeptical, discerning citizenry that would call the government out when the government went too far. So dissent is literally baked into the document. Dissent is the whole point. It is a precondition for democracy, not something that is corrosive to it. And we need to say that over and over again.
Absolutely. I mean, especially because we currently live in a time where the people at the highest echelons of our government are displaying not just authoritarian fever dreams, if you will, leanings, but like tendencies. And this president is actively acting on an authoritarian playbook. And one of the biggest pieces of an authoritarian playbook is trying to his governing philosophy is about retribution, but it's also criminalization of ordinary life and criminalization of our politics. And that is what not just Donald Trump, but I think at this point, the entire Republican Party apparatus and any institution that does not stand up in this moment is aiding and abetting in, which is why I think your point about the 17th Amendment story, the pushing for the senators to be elected by the people is so important, because it is the people who have constantly pushed and pressed for change in this country throughout our history. You know, we, the people in the preamble, it didn't include anybody on this Riverside today, anybody on this podcast, and literally anybody. It's a lot of people listening in as we record this, and we didn't include none of them either. But throughout history, the people have expanded the we, and now we are at a time in a generation that, frankly, every generation before us has faced, and asking the question of who this country belongs to, who exactly is the we, and there are factions that are trying to say that the we is only, straight Christian
Heritage
white men.
Americans.
Come on, foundational white Americans.
Heritage Americans and Native Americans. So the rest of us got to go to them. And if that's the point. Because if they going to be real about who actually was here, let's be very clear about that.
Well, they're not going to be real because they want to change the story, which is another part of the conversation. But the expansion of the we, I mean, is I think, a remarkable part of the American experiment.
No, I think that's huge. I also think it's why, to Eugene's point, why people feel sort of some kind of way about this particular anniversary. And to be clear, if you go back to the 200th, the bicentennial, the 150th, there have always been anxiety. So it's not like these milestone birthdays come up and everyone's like, America crushing it. No one is saying that. At every turn, there are these letters, speeches where people are like, are we getting it right? I mean, like, maybe America is a Jamaican mom. Like, just like, are we getting it right? Could we do better? Like, where
Bring
are the
back
other
the
5
rest of them
points?
5 points. Exactly.
I think, truly, like, because that is the spirit at each of these milestone birthdays. Like, are we getting it right? And so I think the reason why so many people feel anxiety about this particular anniversary is that because our impulse has always been to expand the we, but right now it feels like we are really retracting, right? And going backwards.
Can I just put this on the table for y'all then? Because as
Yeah.
y'all know, I care a lot about Reconstruction. I'm literally
Yes.
consumed by
Yeah.
Reconstruction and the post-Reconstruction period. And it feels to me that American 250 is really a Reconstruction conversation because at 250, we're asking similar questions that we were asking during Reconstruction, like who gets to be represented, what rights are protected, what is citizenship, who gets to tell the story, who belongs.
hmm
That's a different question than what we were asking in 1776. 1776 like created the republic. Reconstruction tried to define who the republic was actually for.
hmm
And she's obsessed with it for a good reason, right? She talks about
Yeah.
Reconstruction a lot because there are a lot of things, especially for Black people, it feels starting to feel a little itchy. Like, oh, that looks a little similar to some things we've seen before.
Well,
And like you
but
said, old
because
wine, new
nobody
bottle.
wants to talk about what Reconstruction really I mean, the Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, are a fundamental reordering of the constitutional order. It is a
Mm-hmm.
second founding. And
Mm.
there are a lot of people who don't want to talk about that. There are a lot of people, there are 6 of them on the US Supreme Court who are determined to kind of roll back the Reconstruction Amendments. And when they talk about originalism, it's never from the point of what were these amendments doing
Mm-hmm.
originally. It's always like, let's fetishize 1787. We have at least 3, maybe 4 different constitutions. There's the original Constitution. There's the Constitution that's amended with the Bill of Rights. There's the Reconstruction Constitution, where the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments change up everything.
Mm.
And then there's the amendments that are passed at the height of the Gilded Age, the 16th through the 19th Amendments. And like all of those are meaningful. We don't talk about any of them. We especially do not talk about the Reconstruction Amendments. We're
Mm.
not teaching it right now, certainly not under
Yeah.
this administration and its acolytes. And I think that is by design, because if you don't know what that
Mm-hmm.
period is about, if you don't know what those amendments are doing, then you are fine existing in what came before and what they would like to come after.
And
Mm.
also, if you don't know, I think one of the things that's so interesting as I get older, I've always been a nerd, so I've always like read a lot. Like always loved history as a kid. I couldn't do math and science, so I was like, "Well, history. And these books seem right."
That's why I went to
Um,
law school, Eugene.
exactly. I was like, let me find a job where I don't have to count that much. But
Only figuring out shopping discounts. That's okay.
exactly,
We can do that.
exactly.
Eugene is not looking for a discount. He's paying
Yes.
full price. He rich.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. The real world is my friend. I don't have a Birkin. So we okay.
Can I just
Call
say,
me
Melissa
rich.
also texted me about my Birkin in a
It's just
video. She sent a
robbing
screenshot and
you.
was like,
We
"Is this
will be
a
robbing.
Birkin?"
It is, yeah.
Shout out
She
to
wanted
It
Mr.
rob.
was.
Townsend.
It was.
It was. Yeah, shout out to Mr. Townsend. I'm still waiting on mine. We've talked about this. I don't have it.
Man.
But the more I find out and the more I, gather information about this country and the true history of this country, right?
Mhm.
30 years or something of doing that. What strikes me now is you have a country of folks who are trying to keep people from the truth, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
And it's not only if you don't know the truth, you don't know what's possible. You don't know your role in it, right?
Yeah.
And I think the thing that's so
Oh, that's good,
interesting,
Eugene.
right?
Yeah.
Like the thing that's so interesting about this country, and Melissa, you talked about this a little bit, is that like it was always like normal people that forced the country to do things. It
Yeah.
like the lawmakers that have given us rights, right? That have written all the things, other than the original guys, everybody else had to be
Well,
pushed
even the
to do
original
it by the
guys are
citizenship.
ordinary
Yes.
people, Eugene. I mean,
Yes,
like,
those
Mhm.
randoms.
I mean,
Yes.
so
Not the founding fathers.
they
No,
were
this
just
country are
normal
randos.
guys.
Just
They were normal
rando
guys. They were just
Yes,
random guys.
yes.
I mean,
Some
like,
nerds, some guys like
there is
giving them
greatness
guns was
in all of
crazy.
us. I mean, it's not
Yes,
to diminish
yes.
their accomplishment, but I mean, like, they were just random guys who found themselves in a moment and thought their way out of it. Like, we can
Yes.
do that. Like, there's
Right.
greatness in all of us. And, like James Madison, just like he's like a college student, like just out of the College of New
Right.
Jersey when
Right.
they start doing this. And like, I mean, and to be clear, there is no guarantee of success. I mean, so
Right.
I'll give them full credit. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
one of these people who's like, these guys sucked totally. They owned people, many of them. They had real
Problem.
flaws. They were
Mhm.
incredibly elitist. This is a moment of genius and incredible courage, and we ought to
Both things
acknowledge
can be
that.
true at the
Both
same
things can
time.
be true. I mean, I
Yes.
really do hate this, like, it's one or the other. I mean, like, we can chew gum and walk. can't we? We
Yes.
can do both. I
Yes.
mean, like, I think it actually, one of the reasons why we're having such a hard time is that people don't want to do two things at once.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, but they were ordinary people, and it's not diminishing their legacies to just acknowledge that. Like, maybe some of them are
Mhm.
incredibly privileged, whatever. They were ordinary people living in extraordinary times, taking extraordinary risks, and in the end, doing something that was extraordinary. We can
Yeah.
all do that. We can all be ordinary people in an extraordinary moment and live up to that moment.
But you have to choose to do it. That's
Well,
the thing is like
well,
you have to
it's a
choose to
choice.
do it because like what I find is that when I'm having conversations with folks, whether they be everyday folks or some of these East Coast elites that we be talking to and we're friends with, what I hear is like, well, somebody got to fix it. You know what I mean? Like someone has to
We
fix
can
this
fix it.
thing.
You can fix it.
It has to be us.
Well, so I mean, I tell my students, they hate when I say this. Real reward carries real risk. Like Martin Luther King
Yeah.
Jr., if you've
Yep.
read Jonathan Ives' biography of Martin Luther King, I mean, it's an amazing biography, but it reveals like King struggled. He struggled as a young man. His greatness was not preordained. He really experienced
Mhm.
Right.
doubt and anxiety, but he found himself in this extraordinary time and he rose to meet that moment and he took incredible risks. And maybe that's required of us in this moment. I tell my students it was letter from a Birmingham jail, not letter from a Birmingham Four Seasons. Like
Right.
it required risk.
Right,
Like
right, right,
he
right.
stepped out on literally on faith because this was going to get you thrown in jail. Like John Lewis crossed that bridge and got beat up. Like these moments require extraordinary courage, extraordinary faith. And that's what makes you extraordinary. Like these were ordinary
Yeah.
people who stepped up to do extraordinary things that maybe even they didn't realize they were capable of.
Right.
And I think I heard you say this on an NPR interview, but that because civics is not being taught in schools less and less over the last 20 years,
Mhm.
and you made this point just a moment ago, that it is very hard. People don't know the history, so
Yeah.
they can't even defend it.
Right.
But I think part of that is also like the story that we tell ourselves about America. The
Yeah.
reason people don't want to hold in their mind that like the founders were also ordinary people, yet they did extraordinary things, is because we have convinced ourselves about this, American exceptionalism. That
Yeah.
there is something inherently special about the people that founded this country. That there
And
is
the people who've
something.
changed it. Yeah.
Come on
Mhm.
now,
Yeah.
that in order to serve as president of the United States, you gotta have some mystical powers. That's what the people is telling Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan that they think the president has, child, was insane. And I think the story about our country and who gets to tell the story is fundamental. And I don't know if you saw the piece about Lonnie Bunch in The
Yes.
Atlantic. Clint
Yeah.
Smith just did this profile on Lonnie
I
Bunch.
love Clint Smith. I mean,
Right?
Clint Smith
He's
Yeah,
so
so
brilliant.
He's
good.
great. He's
So
great.
good.
One of the great writers of our time,
How the
that
Word
Clint
is
Smith.
Cast is such an
Mm.
excellent book. So Clint Smith went around
Yes.
to all of these historic sites in the United States and talked about how they are interpreting history. And, I was a tour guide at Monticello, the plantation home of
God.
Thomas Jefferson when I was in college. And so I read the section on Monticello with such great interest. And then I did this event just a few weeks ago in Philadelphia with Clint. And we just like started chopping it up about Monticello
Mm.
and being a tour guide and what was it like to be like a 20-year-old tour guide, like a Black 20-year-old tour guide
Yeah.
at Monticello at a time when they were just beginning to kind of bring
Mm.
out this whole aspect of Jefferson's life that was about enslavement.
Yeah.
Mm. It's so
Yeah.
real. I just think about in this time as we are, I mean, obviously, again, the government is trying to, and not just the federal government, there are state governments all across this country
Yeah.
trying to change the story that we
Yeah.
are able to tell about our history and tell us that there are some parts that we can't talk about. It strikes me that people like Ida B. Wells, people like Fannie Lou Hamer, folks like Nicole Hannah Jones, right?
Yeah.
People like James Baldwin. What ties them all together is that none of these folks have ever asked permission to
Yeah.
tell the American story.
Yeah.
They were just claiming the authority to tell it. Ida B. Wells told the truth about why lynchings were actually happening when the prevailing thought at the time was that lynchings were necessary because Black men were dangerous criminals. And Ida B. Wells, she challenged that story with data, with investigation, with reporting, with names. Fannie Lou Hamer, she challenged whether America honored the ideals that they said that they had. We talked about James Baldwin. I feel like we need a reminder that we don't need permission to tell the American story. We just need to tell it and tell all of it.
Right.
So I feel that so profoundly. I think that was an animating principle of this book project. So Simone and I did a special in advance of the 2024 election where we talked
Fabulous.
to
Yes, we did.
we
That's why I
did
fell in love with Melissa Murray.
not a cigar or a tracksuit in sight on our
Ooh,
special, but
clock it,
Hello.
Melissa. Okay, we were well dressed.
Yes, beautiful.
mindful of our budgets. But we were talking to these young women at a nail salon in Washington, D.C. And I remember one of them just talking about Joe Biden and the things that she wished Joe Biden had done as president and how disillusioned she'd been by his administration. And I understood the disillusionment, but there was a disconnect because I was like, some of the things you want Joe Biden to do, he cannot do. Like, those are things your mayor could do. Those are things
Yeah.
Congress could do, but they're not things that a president could do. And it occurred to me, and I think I said it to you when we were done, we have a whole generation of people coming online as voters and citizens who literally have no idea how this country works. And I'm not even saying it's their fault. Like, we have divested.
No, it's our fault. It's the it's the adults'
well,
fault.
I think it might be George W. Bush's fault and No Child Left Behind's fault.
This is the second stray that George W. Bush and No Child Left Behind have caught on this
That's true.
podcast.
It wasn't
People
a
are
stray. I
coming.
aimed directly. All right, Ellie. Not a stray.
Ah! We got smoke for No Child Left Behind because
Exactly.
the children have been left.
Correct.
Well, I mean, to be clear, I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I
Well.
do wonder if it isn't by design that we no longer have this robust civics education, why we no longer have Schoolhouse Rock. Like, I mean, is someone benefiting from a whole generation
Yes.
of citizens who don't know how the government works? I mean,
That's how Donald Trump got elected president. Part of the reason, to be very clear.
we have these people who are stepping up to the ballot box to be heard with perhaps an incomplete idea of how government works. We have people running for office who may have an incomplete idea about how government works. We needed at this moment for someone to step up and say, like, hey, I'm going to take it. I'm going to try and explain it to you in like lay terms. Like, this is a book a high school student could read. And I didn't ask permission. I didn't ask anyone to tell me it was okay to do this. Like, I mean, I called it the Constitution so moms of liberty could think twice before they tried to ban it. But I didn't ask permission. Like, this is our document. We can interpret this. I know there is a right-wing version of this. I wasn't trying to be left-wing. I just tried to play it straight down the middle. Like, here's what this person says about it. Here's what this person says. Here's what the Supreme Court has done. This is what was initially the impulse here. We have to know this stuff, and we have to come to our
Yeah.
own conclusions about what each section means, what each article means, so that we can participate meaningfully in this and unapologetically.
I want to dig more into this concept of this lack of civics education being the reason why people are like, well, the president needs to do this. I also think that they have watched Donald Trump
Do a lot of
completely
things.
ignore.
Yeah.
And so what I hear from young voters is like, he's doing it. So what is your excuse as as Joe Biden or as Kamala Harris or as whoever the Democratic
Why
nominee
won't
is
they
going to be
do
in
it? Yeah.
2028? Why won't you just do it? I think about this a lot when it came to the student loan forgiveness that folks were asking
Okay,
for.
tell
wanted.
us more.
Because like you had young voters who would say like, we want this, and Joe Biden knew that, right?
And he
But
did it.
and they would,
And he
and he
did
did it. But wait now, he didn't do it the way that he said he was going to do it. To be very clear,
Well, what
that
do you
people
mean?
wanted.
The Supreme Court
Well,
blocked
let
him.
me finish. When he would,
girls are
when
fighting.
this is our normal.
Yes.
When you would hear from people, and you heard from them all the time, Simone, I'm sure too, when you were on the road with Vice President Harris, is they wanted more. And what you would hear from the administration, what you hear from President Biden is the courts would block this. We have to do it in a way that doesn't fly in the face of the law, because then the courts are just going to take it away. So I would say that to people. I'd say, well, this is what the administration says. What they would then say is, why not test the courts, right? And so why not force the courts to say no? Why not force their hand? And that is what Donald Trump does, right? Donald Trump forces the courts to like have to think much more creatively than they ever have have. And the
Mm-hmm.
argument for folks is that that Democrats don't do the same thing. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that is their
Yeah.
argument.
Now, let me just, I'm glad I let you finish because
Yeah.
I don't disagree with the
Yeah.
people
Now,
that
see, look at
say
you.
you should, okay. I was like, hold up now, Joe Biden did it. And I
Yes, ma'am.
remember I was there in the room when we had the discussions
Yeah.
about making that promise on the campaign trail. I was there in the room when we had the discussions about trying to make good on that or not in the White House. You could literally hear the protesters out on the street.
Outside. Right.
Inside the
Mhm.
you were at the White House, Eugene. You could hear them in the press file room.
Yep.
You could
Yep.
also hear them in the West Wing, in the Vice President's office, and even in the Oval Office. So we heard the people in the streets. Shout out to the NAACP, y'all. It did work. We was like,
It
y'all
d-
hear them outside. We gotta do
Yeah.
something. But I do think this idea of like, oh, you must like test the courts. This goes back to, again, like the different kind of people, the people that come up in politics, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think if people look at someone like Zohran Mamdani, right? Because there's a lot of talk. Everybody's like, oh, everybody want to be a democratic socialist. And I think that's the wrong analysis. The right
Correct.
analysis is that, come on now, okay? Don't be looking like
Exactly.
mud spelled backward, dumb. The right analysis the right analysis of this moment is that people want fighters and they want people who
Yes.
are willing to be crafty. And the
Mhm.
thing that Mayor Mamdani has done is he was a fighter. He talked specifically about what he wanted to fight for, and then he got crafty on how to do it. He has a
Mhm.
governor in Governor Kathy Hochul that was willing to put the money where the mouth was because she herself is trying to get reelected, okay?
Correct.
To make childcare universally
Mhm.
free.
Mhm.
Right? That just didn't happen out of thin air. It wasn't like, oh, let's just be illegal with it. Let's just trample on the Constitution
Right.
with it.
Right.
They got crafty. And I think the difference when people see what Donald Trump is doing in this moment and they talk about the future that we want and how we're writing the next chapter and what Democrats should be doing, the answer is not be illegal AF. Okay,
Break the law.
answer,
Right.
break the law. The answer is get crafty because that is in fact
Mhm.
what Republicans did. But their craftiness flies in the face of the Constitution, and frankly, is swimming in the authoritarian streams. That's what I think. Melissa, what say you?
So let me take a different slant on this. I think Joe Biden did find a kind of crafty way to
Mhm.
do it, right? And I think he was genuinely trying to do it in a way that he thought would be within the scope of the Constitution that would be
Right.
upheld by this court. But then it got to this court. And I think we really have
Mm.
to start having, as a people, honest conversations about the way in which it is not just Donald Trump that is a
Mhm.
burr in the side of democracy, but this court is also an
Mhm.
existential threat to democracy. The 6-3 conservative supermajority is an existential threat to democracy. Just a week or so ago, the court issued a decision, didn't get a lot of press on mainstream media because it's not about birthright citizenship, but
Mhm.
it basically allowed an oil company, Exxon, to sue
Yeah.
the Cuban government and I guess fuck foreign sovereign immunity. We're not doing that anymore.
Mhm.
Okay, I guess so. They also
Mhm.
issued a decision concerning freedom of religion. They're
Mhm.
related to freedom of religion. There was a Rastafarian prisoner in Louisiana whose dreadlocks were cut off in
Yes.
violation of his religious tenets. Like, this is a
Mm.
court that's always telling us about the free exercise of religion, but apparently that's only for white Christians because when this guy was like, hey, they cut off my locks. Now I want to sue them and I want to bring a cause of action against the individual prison guards.
Mhm.
The court is like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. When Congress passes a law like this law in question, which requires all prisons receiving federal funds to adhere to tenets of religious freedom, because the official prison guards, the prison officials, did not agree to be bound by the law, they can't be sued. Like, what the F is that?
That's
Like,
not
you
how
have
this
to
is
like
supposed to work.
affirmatively opt into federal laws as a prison guard in order for them to apply to you. Like, if that is the standard for when
Mm.
the federal government issues money to state and state entities and require
Yeah.
compliance
Mhm.
with federal laws, if you have to first officially opt into complying with the law in order to be held accountable under it, basically we're done with any
Huh.
kind of conditioning federal funds on the compliance with certain laws for any of these state and local officials. I mean, the court has like blown a hole through that. And so we have to talk about this.
But like some people are done, right? Like
Yes.
because the same people who like to nitpick what is a religion, and in their eyes, Rastafarianism is not
No,
Mhm.
you're
worthy
totally
of the
right.
same.
Like if it came up and this was a Christian evangelical, I'm sure we'd find a
Right,
way to hold these prison
right,
guards
right.
accountable.
Like there be another, which is even worse. But your point is
We
right.
need to
Yeah.
be normalizing court reform as an actual topic related to
Mhm.
democratic preservation.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Mm.
Yeah.
We have gotten the Supreme Court's decision on birthright citizenship. And I'm just wondering, I mean, I kind of feel like the ones they save for the end of the
Yeah.
term, it means it's really bad. Like,
You're right. Usually the stuff at the end, at least with this court, is really
yeah.
bad. But in 2015, Obergefell versus Hodges, which was the case that
Mhm.
nationalized same-sex marriage, was at the end, and that was a huge victory. Love
Yeah.
wins. I think what's going on here, and I'll just be very clear, right now, the court is in its wind down period and they're going very, very slow. What does that mean? It means the girls are fighting. And it's not just a fight
Mhm.
between the 6 conservatives and the 3 liberals. I think there's actually some internecine warfare going on among the
Yeah.
conservatives about what does it mean to be truly right wing. And we've seen that in a couple of opinions where like Justice Barrett and Justice Thomas were going at it. Like, I mean, I was like, you know what? Please work this out. This is unseemly. But they are fighting amongst themselves. So I think that's one reason why this is taking so long. Like there's just a
She
lot
said,
of
"Have some
infighting
class."
going on.
Get some decorum.
Exactly.
Earlier on, after the oral argument, I was 100% sure that the Trump administration was going to get dealt a loss on this executive order. The justices seemed really skeptical of the administration's
Yeah.
account of Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, which is the Citizenship Clause.
Mhm.
And to be very clear, if you can read, and I am assuming that every justice can, then you know what the Citizenship Clause means, and it's
It's very
very
clear. It's not
straightforward.
very complicated.
It's not
Exactly.
complicated at all. And
Exactly.
and they were very clear in the history of Section 1 that they were restoring a common law default, which was that if you're born here, you are a citizen of the country. That was disrupted in 1857
Yeah.
when the Supreme Court decided Dred Scott. And that when they were making the decision to return to the common law default, they understood that there were immigrants, maybe even immigrants who were not eligible to be citizens, but if their children were born here, they would be citizens of the United States. So,
This is what the first line of the 14th Amendment says, Section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. That's a constitutional scholar, baby. She didn't
It's
even need to
very,
read
'cause
it.
she knows the whole
I had to
damn
look it
thing.
up.
can I finish my theory? Let me just finish
Yeah,
my theory
yeah,
real
yeah,
quick. Okay.
yeah.
So I thought they were going to deal him a loss. I did not
Mhm.
think it was going to be unanimous. And that by itself is a travesty. And we should call it that. The
Yeah.
fact that we cannot get 9 people on the Supreme Court to read those words and understand that, yes, it includes the children of undocumented people, that's a problem. All right. I just want to say this part. Please, please, please do not be among the chorus of media types who are like, the Supreme Court saved birthright citizenship. The Supreme Court saved the Constitution. The Supreme Court stood up to Donald Trump. Like, no. The Supreme Court stood up for itself. This is a self-aggrandizing
Melissa.
decision at the end of this term where they've already decimated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and this is their way to go
Hello.
out on a high with people
Yeah.
talking about them like they did something important. Do not give them credit for doing the least, like doing the reading. They read the syllabus.
Right.
Good for them. Do not give them credit for doing more than that, because here's the rub. This same question about this EO was raised a year ago in the
Right.
Trump versus Casa case. That was the case where the court decided only the jurisdictional question, whether or not the nationwide injunction
Yeah.
was a suitable remedy for district courts to impose. And the court said, no, we're going to lock down how we do nationwide injunctions going forward and make it harder for district courts to hold this administration to account. Fine. At that time, a year ago, the ACLU was like, but why don't you also decide this basic question, the substantive question of what Section 1 of the 14th Amendment means? And this court declined to do so at that moment. And they let this theory of birthright citizenship, which literally was the province of kooks and cranks and right-wing nutcases, they allowed it to fester and become legitimate and wait for a whole year and just let it become on the wall when it's totally off the wall. And they unsettled something that had been bedrock. And we should not give them credit for standing up to the president, standing up for the Constitution when they allowed that to happen for an entire year.
Years ago, Melissa, you tell me if I'm right or wrong. It felt like they would choose like one or two cases that would
Yeah.
like shake the bedrock of the American society.
And then they
now
go
it's like,
quiet. Yeah,
yeah, and then
every
they
year
shut the
it's
hell
something
up
new.
and they
Yeah.
take a while. Yeah, but
No.
now it feels like there's like 8 or 9 cases. It's like every case they pick, they're like, you know what,
Yeah.
we want to shake the whole foundation of what this country actually means.
You know why? What is the point of a 6-3 supermajority if you're not going to use it? This is the YOLO court. You only live once. The other thing a 6-3 conservative supermajority means is that, to take a case, to get certiorari granted at the Supreme Court, you just need 4 votes.
Right.
Before,
right.
when they had a 5-4 bare conservative majority, they always had to worry about what if someone peeled off? Like, what if we lost our 5 and then, cacophony and like
Yeah.
these liberals are writing decisions. Now, with a 6-3 conservative supermajority, they don't care if they lose Amy. They don't care if they lose Neil. They still have 5. And what that means, they are a lot less choosy about the cases that they decide to take. And one of the things that's been happening with greater frequency since they got the 6-3 conservative supermajority is that they've been doing what's called a dig, where they dismiss a case as improvidently granted. So they put a case on the calendar, they grant certiorari, they hear oral argument, and then they're like, ooh, this is probably not a great case for us to do this. If they actually were taking more time trying to decide what they are actually going to review, they would probably have fewer of these digs. They're having
Right.
more and more digs because they need 4 people. They have 4 votes for almost everything. And they know they don't have to worry about losing a vote. So they take a lot of things and then realize, I think, that maybe this wasn't a good vehicle for what we're trying to do.
What does it mean for our country that you have a YOLO Supreme Court?
For the next, not even just the next 250, what does it mean for the next 365?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a court that wields extraordinary power, right? Maybe even more power than the framers intended. Like Alexander Hamilton did not foresee this kind of Supreme Court. Like he called the court the least dangerous branch. The framers were principally preoccupied with limiting the authority of Congress because they remembered the Parliament and they did not want
Right.
that. They remembered the king. They did not want that either. But what they did not imagine when they were thinking about how to structure government, and they were doing all of this, right? Like trying to divide power so that no single branch could consolidate power and become tyrannical. They always imagined that the other branches would be there to check them. So,
Right.
if the president stepped out too often, they assumed that Congress would check him or that the courts would check him. They never imagined that we would have a Congress that is pretty much on the couch and a Supreme Court that is actively midwifing the president's most excessive impulses.
But why didn't they think about that? Because they had just come from a tyrannical, like,
They thought the other branches would check them. I mean, like the other thing they didn't really anticipate, Eugene, or didn't, I think, assume the extent
Yeah.
of was the problem of political parties and partisanship.
yes,
I
that-
don't think
yeah,
they ever
yeah,
imagined
yeah.
that Congress would be so riven by politics and partisanship that it just can't do anything. Right.
Yeah.
So there's that. And they also did not foresee judicial review. That's something that John Marshall,
Came later,
perhaps the
yeah.
greatest Chief Justice in the history of the United States Supreme Court, did in 1803 in Marbury versus Madison. Judicial review is nowhere specified in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Marshall basically says, what's the point of writing this down if you're not going to have someone read it and enforce it? That's me.
Right.
That's us.
Right.
And then he goes back to his office and strokes a hairless cat for an hour because this is the greatest judicial power grab in history. And we have a
Was the
court that
cat
does it.
naked? Was the cat
Child,
naked?
No, that is a.
It's just
that
one of
is
those
a-
hairless cats. Hairless
You
cats.
know, that's what the evil people have, them hairless cats
Yeah.
in the movies.
You've
Yeah.
seen
So you
I'm
watch
definitely
Austin
allergic.
Powers. That's why
Austin
they're
Pow- thank
hairless,
you,
because they ain't got
Eugene.
no hair and no dander. It's in Austin Powers when he's like got the little hairless cat. This is also from Dr. No of James Bond. This
Yes.
is the cat.
Mm.
But are they
Yeah.
hypoallergenic? You know what? I'm getting off topic.
You're off
Way
topic.
off.
I way off, but
Clock
like it's
it.
a question I have. It's a question I have. You know what, Melissa? I mean, I am concerned. I'm concerned that the kids aren't reading. I'm concerned that the kids who didn't read are now adults that want to run for office. I'm concerned about the Supreme Court, and then nobody seems to be able to stop them or prepared to do so in a short amount of time. I'm concerned about the president. I'm concerned about our democracy. I'm just concerned. I'm concerned about everything that's happening.
So, Melissa, is there something to be hopeful about, I guess? Help my girl who is very concerned. Why should people, as we're hitting this semi-quincentennial, be hopeful? Why should they think this is going to be okay, that this country is going to be okay? Why should they be hopeful right now?
Listen, we're all Black folk here.
Hmm.
Yes. Gather around. Put your cards on the table. Get your Black cards out.
Haven't we learned, like, hope is all we have? I mean, like, if we were going to give up now, what is even the point? Like, did John Lewis give up? Like, no one thought that they were going to win. Like, when
Yeah.
Thurgood Marshall decided to sit down with Charles Hamilton Houston and William Hastie, and they were going to figure out how to break Jim Crow, like, no one was like,
Mhm.
oh, yeah, this is totally going to happen. It sounds like a drunk fever dream. Like,
Yeah.
Jim Crow was so embedded. Like, you were literally going to argue to break Jim Crow, and the Supreme Court, like 9 white guys, were going to be like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Of course you have to have hope, like for the most insane, outlandish ideas. The founding fathers had the same outlandish ideas. A country that was governed by the people and their representatives, like, no one had seen that, really. They lived at a time of monarchy and, like, burgeoning empire. Like, the idea of a democracy, who had heard of that? Like, those were outlandish ideas. The idea of a multiracial, multi-faith democracy felt outlandish in the civil rights movement, but we had it briefly. And maybe there are people now who are trying to roll that back. And that's part of our story, too, because every moment of progress is always
Yes.
met with retrenchment. And we always keep pushing. And so I'm hopeful that we know enough about where we have been and how we have gotten past where we have been to know that the only way out is through. And we
Yeah.
just keep pushing.
You better come on, Melissa. Get me
Yes.
together.
Yes.
The
yes.
only way out is
yes.
through. You're Jane Harris. Ring the bell.
Yes. Yeah, baby.
Can I tell one more story?
Yes, 100%.
Sure.
I don't
Can I
care
tell
about
one
those
story?
producers.
This is a story for the ordinary people. Like, if you think, like, there's nothing I can do, I can't do anything.
Yes.
I'm just
Give them some
stuck here.
agency. Yeah.
The 27th Amendment is the last amendment that is ratified to the Constitution. It was ratified in 1992. It was actually proposed in the 1790s along with the other amendments that became the Bill of Rights. It never got passed. It didn't get enough states to sign on in order for it to be ratified. So it just sort of languished there from 1790 to the late 1980s when Gregory Watson, a student at the University of Texas at Austin, had to write a term paper. And he decided to write his term paper for political science about amendments that never made it. And so he wrote about this amendment. It was called the Compensation Amendment. And basically, it prevented Congress from giving itself a pay raise during a period when they were still serving. So they had to wait until the next Congress came in for the pay raise to go into effect. He's like, this sounds like a good idea. Wrote the paper about it. He gets a C. All right. So he gets a C.
He would have been in a lot of trouble in your house.
He would. I'd be like, where are the other two levels?
Yeah.
Where's this A grade? He gets a C. He is undaunted and undeterred because he thinks this is a great idea. So he calls up a senator from Maine and is like, how do I get a constitutional amendment passed? And the senator is like, what? And then eventually starts giving him the names of legislators in the various states that have not yet ratified this amendment. And there's no deadline on this amendment, so it's wide open.
Yeah.
He gets to work, starts calling people. There's a massive check kiting scandal in the House, and this gives some, heft to his belief that there should be limits on Congress's ability to do this kind of financial stuff with their own pay. And there, like lots of press around it. And ultimately, he succeeds in getting the requisite number of states to ratify this amendment in 1992. So he is successful. 200 years later, he gets the 27th Amendment added to the Constitution. And not only does Greg Watson change the Constitution, he gets his grade changed. The University of Texas at Austin says, you know what? This looks like an A paper to me. And they change his grade from a C to an A. We can do this. We can do this.
We can do this, okay? You know what, Melissa? I'm concerned, but you also have reminded, I think, us all about the power of hope.
Yes.
And
the power
only
we
way,
all hold. Also.
Yes. To be
Yeah.
extraordinary.
Yes. Yes, to
Yeah.
be extraordinary, even the ordinary randos. It is literally in our history. It is in,
Exactly.
it is
We were
imbued in
founded
our
by ordinary
bloodlines.
randos, and we'll still be
Exactly. And
founded
so
by
are
them.
we.
We can
Yes.
all do this. Well, you
Amazing.
know what? Well, happy 4th of July, everybody. Happy birthday, America. Happy Juneteenth, okay? And
Hmm.
keep hope alive, as the late, great Reverend Jesse Jackson would say.